I'm the Director of Long-Term Forecasting and Market Analysis globally. I refer to GM as kind of a three-headed monster if you look at our sales footprint. Huge presence in the United States, China, and Brazil. That's kind of where our employment follows as well. Differing products there. And I'm going to walk you through what I call the seat at the leadership table, selling forecast and management with visualization tools at General Motors. I think this is a topic that's near and dear to a lot of you in the audience today. Let me start out with baseline. So really, General Motors, as you know, went into bankruptcy in 2009. And at that point in time, we really removed a lot of our market analysis capabilities. And we reduced the team to really a core group of administrators. And what do we have from that? We had a perpetual hockey stick business plan that was often the butt of many jokes, but the reality was that it was affecting our investments, our spending, our resources. True lack of engagement among the forecasters. And items would happen. And a lot of times you'd maybe talk to an analyst and they would pull some old forecasts out of the drawer and they'd say, I told you 3 years ago this wasn't going to work. But it's just sitting in a drawer. And so they felt like their voice was never being heard, really. Lack of trust by management. For better or for worse, many of these hockey stick forecasts were the result of the forecasting team. You know, even though the forecasters would swear in blood, hey, those weren't my numbers, you had a company of 250,000 people. When they see a forecast, it's probably made by forecasting. And therefore, all these forecasting misses, it brought up a lot of management mistrust in what was going on within the forecasting organization. And what's the knock-on effect of that? Well, you start to ignore them, you don't invest, and then you start to override. So I have the gut feeling there. And I think if you picture the stereotypical automaker, maybe of the 60s, a bunch of guys sitting around with cigars in a conference room saying, let's make more of these. And we like to kind of hold up our product czars and things like that. And we have this kind of this macho, hey, I know from my gut this is what's happening. And unfortunately, we get a lot of that. So what happens with that? You guys familiar with the volt? So I would say you repeat a volt forecast over and over again. Well, what's a volt forecast? When the volt came out, this was a revolutionary product. So GM leadership said, hey, look, the Toyota Prius is selling 200,000 units a year. We can certainly do that, no problem. We're as big as they are. We're a better player here in the United States. We're going to sign up for 200,000. The Toyota Prius cost $25,000 per unit. The Volt was $40,000. Anybody see an issue with that? So despite that fact, so huge engagement within the organization. Hey, are we going to sell this? What's the opinion? And at the end of the day, we overrode it. We said, let's sign up for 200,000. What happens when you do that? Spend half $500 million on a factory to build it. Okay. By the way, this thing has a battery and an engine in it. We made both. Okay. So, and also that engine. We're really smart because we have a global footprint, so we can reuse our engines everywhere. So we say, this demand is so certain that we're going to need another engine plant, but let's look at the lowest landed cost possible for the company. We're going to build that engine plant in Korea. We can do our supply to the factory here in Michigan from a different factory in Flint, Michigan, and then we'll balance our capacity. Our total cost will go down as a company. So when the sales didn't come in for the Volt, I had an underutilized vehicle assembly plant. I had an underutilized engine plant, so much to a point where we needed to take a shift off of the Flint engine plant. So we laid off a whole shift of people. Well, what did the union say? You're giving our jobs to Korea. You just built another plant in Korea. We had labor issues, all because of this, at the end of the day, this forecast. And so I think if I could stress anything, the importance of, and I work in product development, so I'm long lead time, but really giving management a good look at what no kidding is going to happen and kind of up to 5 years out. You can see the knock-on effects of this. And this vehicle, despite being an engineering marvel, is billions of dollars of waste for the company. It was, as well as union issues. So my challenge, really, I've been at this for 2 years with the global team, is how to become a truly valued business partner at General Motors. I'm an engineer. I'm not an economist. I have a passion for manufacturing systems and a passion for human decision making. So I really try to take this problem and reduce it to my core beliefs. So I believe in a lot of gold rat, game theory, Deming's on the lower left there was total quality management, as well as where I kind of started, which was working as an engineer at a manufacturing plant in Buffalo, New York, making engines. And then Ono, who's the father of the Toyota production system. So from my lens, my challenge to make this credible, and the comment I always got was, oh, well, that just comes from forecasting. And I don't know where that number comes from, that they provide this number. And I really wanted to pull back the mystery. And I always think about The Wizard of Oz when and I continue to hear these comments sometimes that we don't really know what's behind that number. And to really pull that transparency through to management and how. So where did I go with this? So I mentioned my manufacturing background. So I really believe in, and this is a Harvard Business Review article, it's sorted. Forecasting's knowledge work, but how do you take lean principles of manufacturing and apply that to forecasting? And six simple principles that I work to every day, and that's root all the waste, and strive to make tacit knowledge explicit, specify how workers communicate with one another, use a scientific method to solve problems, so root it in analytics, plan for an incremental journey. From my early days at working at a manufacturing plant, I can still remember the continuous improvement plan that the engineer had that was this big, with 56 items on here. Do you think any one of those was getting addressed? And you really can take it down to the core couple of items that you want to improve. Very small list, finish the items, do the feedback again, and add more to the list. And that works for any job, actually. But to have so many continuous improvement items that you can't even, it's got to be incremental. It's got to be small. And then leaders blaze the trail. So you really have to have a buy-in from leadership and to be a leader yourself. So if we look at rooting out waste, I mentioned General Motors is a 225,000 employee company. At one point in time, my analysts, I really felt like it was a call center. That they're fielding phone calls all day that is somebody's 2-minute request, can you give me that data again? And it happens over and over and over again. The first thing we've really done is get the data in the hands of the people. Eliminate the 1,000 cuts of 10-minute requests. Really, you have so many precious minutes in a day, and for your analysts, that knowledge time has to be working on things that add value to the company. And you guys are probably familiar with Power BI. It's a Tableau copy from Microsoft, and we're really in bed with Microsoft, so we're pushing Power BI. We've put everything out to Power BI, so we have a porthole now. So I don't need to take these requests. Can you give me? I had an instance where executives receive our business plan 8 times in a spreadsheet over the course of 2 months. Then these guys are just sending back the sent mail. But it's an interruption. It takes time, and it really throws you off your day. So if we really look at and on the left there, I have our version of the Toyota production system, our waste elimination, and then really look at the overprocessing steps and getting you to the core of knowledge work. And what does that do? And what I've found with a lot of our forecasts to critique ourselves is that our analysts they fail to make the most of the information available to them. So I think it's an unfortunate thing that autos are really popular because there's a heck of a lot of stuff out there. People are writing about the auto industry every day. It is really hard to hold on to every piece of knowledge on the auto industry is out there. But when we eliminate all the work that doesn't involve judgment or expertise that eats a huge amount of time. So an example of that is standardizing your PowerPoint slides. Don't recreate things that take time. Make it simple. Have a standard. You don't have to think about that because you need to be spending time thinking about what Tesla's doing or what Google is doing as opposed to what kind of format or font I should put this thing in. Your workers will underestimate the amount of efficiency in their jobs. So a lot of times they don't see it. And I from being at the factory floor, I see these little things, and I've learned that I need to preach it and point it out because it's not keenly obvious to everyone. But you really have to sit down and say, what are these steps you're doing, and how do we free up time for you to think? And no analyst you talk about is going to tell you, hey, I don't want more time to think. You're not going to get that answer. And then going deep enough. So a really simple 5 whys. And to really, and I would classify our analysis as 2 years ago, maybe it was 50% deep enough. We're probably 75% deep enough now. But we're continuing to go down that path where we really get to the bottom and get to the core. And what does that mean to me? That means understanding the auto customers. And for me, autos are not a rational purchase. So if you're talking about on the retail side, these are very emotional purchases with people, and it takes a lot to get to the bottom to understand what the core emotional attachment to a product would be for an individual, and then how do we market that and to capitalize on that, and then what kind of opportunity does that create in the market. And then it never stops, and we continue to look at. So, and I'll get to it in a minute, but we're really taking the time for continuous improvement as well. So often in the past in jobs that I've had, when that wasn't specified as an event that always happened, that you had to prepare for, that you had to attend, it didn't happen. It was always some list of continuous improvement that, hey, and then you do your annual review. Hey, I didn't get to it because you had me too busy with this, or you had me too busy with this, with the other things. So we're writing down how to perform each task, and then we're using data, consistently to get buy-in. So part of the leadership speech is when we then go to our customers, which for me is, in a lot of cases, the regional president of the company. I'm consistent in my format and my message, and it doesn't take him very long to understand, what point I'm trying to make and where the risk is. And I just have an example of that's a best estimate forecast for C cars there on the side there, maybe a little bit hard to read. I'm going to zoom in a little bit later. I mentioned all the inputs. So we have, like I said, unfortunately, a lot of inputs in the auto industry. So from a pricing standpoint, not only how is a vehicle being priced today and what is an incentives assumption, but how that will be in the future. General Motors does a lot of our own research. So we do customer clinics, we do market clinics, and really getting all that piece in. And that's a great advantage for us. We do empathy interviews. We're able to go sit with customers. And so when you start talking about things like electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles and how to project where those are going to be in the future, you can't really look at data and just run some regression. There's no sales history. So you're off looking at lead users and really understanding what drove them to adopt an electric vehicle, and then what benefit are they seeing from it. Voice of customer data, we subscribe to a lot of Merit's data, so survey data. And I think you mentioned in your opening notes, you can't trust the survey data all the time. We get a heck of a lot of survey data. I would agree with that. But it is an input into that. And then we have, does anybody know how many vehicles we sell a year, General Motors? I'm going to guess for me. Was that? Yeah, close to. So this guy's on. He knows. We sell close to 10 million vehicles a year. So underlying that is a very complicated portfolio of products that all have their own brand DNA, positioning in the marketplace, and how they play off of one another. So every vehicle forecast we have to do is got to be within the vein of the portfolio. So here in the United States, we sell Buicks, GMCs, Cadillacs, and Chevrolets. They all have a portfolio of products that play off one another. And within the General Motors family, we're probably 50% loyal, but we do see interaction within vehicles. So we take great care in planning a next-gen Cadillac, and maybe it's at a price point that would somehow touch Buick somehow. We have principles that we have to stay with. So that all has to be comprehended, though, because we end up with a lot of diversions within our product families, if not. So diversion, second choice data, and then vehicle specs are very critical to translating customer needs too. So you got external factors as well as you have internal factors. And what I would say with specs is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the GMC Acadia. You looked at it lately in the last year versus the prior generation? So maybe look a little bit smaller, a lot different, yeah. So knowing how big a vehicle is going to be and how that plays with customers is, a very critical decision, because here's a vehicle that we used to get $36,000 a unit for at a certain length, very good seller, and we're coming now, we're almost the same sales rate, but we're only getting $33,000 a vehicle for it. So is it a success or not? And you could argue, well, look at what's going on in your portfolio, which is a good point. But you also get back to, up on the upper right there, where it's, look at the research clinics, and people tell you they want a bigger vehicle. And so that's one that we're saying, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe this vehicle is a little bit too small. So, but it's things like that you need to get in front of, as opposed to it being on top of you. And then we give a quick overview of the methodology used. We use about 8 different methods, especially for something, we're looking at products 3 to 10 years out. You really have to take completely different looks at it and try to come together on what the forecast would be. I'd say we're advanced from a sales standpoint in showing what the upside and downside would be. We do have some statistical models that will give us the kind of the band for demand for a vehicle. I think that needs to take the next step, where I don't know how well we comprehend that from an operationalizing. I mean, it's still so much easier to take a number from you as opposed to a range. Sometimes you have people that they don't know what to do with it, to be quite honest with you. But we do give the upside and downside and the drivers with it. And then some basic understanding of where the segment would be, which we use our own internal segmentation scheme, but that's largely a size, price, and then historical interaction within. So it's an internal language we speak to each other. Leadership doesn't have an issue with that at all. And then what the key competitors are doing. And usually we talk about the now and then what's coming in the future. One of the critical pieces is, as well as a competitive rollout and diversion assumptions. So I did mention that autos get written about and talked about quite a bit. So we have a really good idea of all our competitors' portfolio plans through about 2021. So there's a lot of signaling going on in the media. Some of it is a little bit of game theory, where you talk about number of EVs you're going to make, and we have to kind of look at some of these things in terms of their whole investment and where their priorities would be. But we come to a consensus on what our competitors are going to be doing. And I think it's really critical, because we lose sight of the fact that oftentimes we have this vehicle that we fall in love with, that it's going to improve on the prior one and it's going to be that great. Well, our competitors are doing the same thing, and we have to keep that rollout right in front, that we know when a new Mustang comes out, what it does to Camaro sales. We know, we have data that tells us that. We know what happens with full-size trucks when either it's Dodge or Ram or Ford or GM. Whenever they launch a new family of full-size trucks, the shares all go up and down with whoever has the newest one. That's something we sometimes lose sight of. And then we give data on reasons for purchase, some of the key drivers, and then as well as what the sales will progress over time. And this is in, I think, RMB on the side here, but I like to give the actual transaction prices, what the share will be, and then look at the decay curve. And in this case, this is showing the impact of what a slight upgrade will do to the vehicle over time. You can see the dotted line is without it. It's a simple chart. And then one of the key things we do for leadership also is that we use a stage gate process for vehicle development. So we check in at gates on vehicles. And the blue there in the background is the range, the volume range that's given. Orange is what forecasting's opinion is. And blue is what we've signed up for as a company. And that goes on every leadership review all the way up to the president of the company for a vehicle program. So an individual program, you can see the different gates on the bottom. And when we get out of bounds on that, it causes a conversation. And then at the bottom, you guys familiar with IHS? IHS is a monster third-party data vendor, very heavily involved in autos. And what happens with our supply base is, because our forecast record has been so bad over time, our suppliers really look to IHS. They'll get a bid from General Motors. They say, okay, IHS, how many are they really going to sell? Because then I'm going to base that on there. So internally, we show what they're saying. Because we want to know what kind of supplier tax we're potentially getting. If we see a big difference and we believe in the vehicle, we actually go to the suppliers and talk to them about it and say, this is the reason why we think this. Because otherwise, if we're showing a big deficit to IHS, they're gonna amortize their tooling against what IHS says from a vehicle standpoint. And we end up paying a penalty for that. It hurts our profitability. So those are an example of this kind of 7 charts that we show, and we'll probably only get to about 10 normally. And I know we have fear of 90, slides of 90, but we keep it pretty simple for leadership. Another thing we do, though, is we do have dashboards for them on the market. So this is, again, a little bit of an eye chart, I apologize, but these are some of the core things that we're looking at from segments of vehicles. So on the upper left is how we believe a certain segment is going to develop over time, and this is in the U.S. market, and then how the pricing has been. So in the middle there is what the distribution of pricing is, as well as some segments surrounding it, and then we look at the competitors' pricing also and how that is transacted. Trends. I mean, anyone here want to buy an SUV in the room? Probably everybody, because we have seen this just massive move away from cars. What does that do to us? I mentioned that we lost a lot of our capabilities in bankruptcy. We're really paying, we're a long lead industry. We're paying the price for a lot of that now for the last couple of years. But we have a factory in Ohio that only makes a car. It makes a sedan, and it has a capacity for 400,000, and there's just not demand there for it. And all of a sudden, you're at a very low utilization. You're paying really high fixed costs, and then you're into labor problems. You're laying off. So our SUV plants today can't make enough, and our car plants are very lowly utilized. So if you looked at our utilization as a whole, we would be kind of like a competitive number, but I can tell you in Arlington, Texas, that full-size SUVs, they can't breathe. They're running 7 days a week, whereas we have a plant sitting idle in Ohio. So to me, that the root of that is credible forecasts, and not only the number of the forecast, but what kind of risk is involved in it. Because when you start really articulating the risk to leadership, now all of a sudden paying for flexibility it's not so big of a deal, right? Whereas a lot of the attitude in the past has been, I know I have this demand, I'm going to build to this, and this is the plan.